Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and we are so thrilled that you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 15 going on 16. It's actually going on 17, now that I think of it. Novels of suspense. My current novel is One Wrong Word, and my upcoming novel in September is called All This Could Be Yours, which I'm extremely excited about it. And I found out recently that it comes out on the same day as Stephen King's new book. So, yeah, lovely. So every time you hear about Stephen King's new book, you say, you crime timers, you say, oh yes, and my friend Hank's book is coming out exactly the same day. So when you hear Stephen King, you think about me. That's how I've decided to do it. But I am delighted today to focus on Josh Moehling's new book, A Long Time Gone. It is touching and redemptive and a little bit funny and a little bit heartbreaking, a wonderful mystery. I am such a fan of Josh and such a fan of his main character. I know we've talked to you about them before, and I cannot wait to hear all about A Long Time Gone today. Josh is there in the Midwest where it's like 42 below zero or something and getting ready to go on book tour. Are you excited?
Yes, it's 0 degrees here in Minneapolis right now, and I'm going to Houston tomorrow where it's supposed to be 70 degrees. So I couldn't be more ready.
Are you excited about book tour? Has this been different for you, this third book?
I'm excited to get to do some traveling, for this book. I've done a lot of events for the first two, kind of mostly around the Midwest and my home state of Minnesota. But yeah, getting to I got events in Houston and Austin this week, and next week I'm in Atlanta, and I can't wait to get out there and see people.
Well, all of you who are crime timers here, you go look at Josh's website and look at his or Instagram and his tour schedule, the word I'm looking for so unsuccessfully, schedule is on that. So I hope you will go join him and welcome him onto the road. If you are new to, and look at all of you who are here today. London is here, and Deborah Pruss and Sue Street and Sherry Steuben and Renee. Randy T is here, and Sharon Bishop, and Betty Fellow says, made it. And we have Mary Garrett is here. Mary Garrett says, I love it, Hank upstaging King, who was my warning to students to moderate the writing they gave me to read. That is so funny. Yeah, well, you never know what's going to happen on the road, and you never know what's going to happen in publishing. Anyway, for those of you who are new to Crime Time and A Mighty Blaze, welcome. Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic 5 years ago, bizarrely, by the fabulous powerhouse duet of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us all reading and keep us all discovering new books and talking with new authors and chatting with some of our favorite authors and maybe finding some new favorites as well. And we have persevered for all this time, and we are delighted still to bring you more and more authors here on Crime Time every Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET, including the fantastic Josh Moehling, who's brand new, A Long Time Gone, is out last week, and he is on the road right now for it. Josh Moehling, let me tell you, listen to this. I almost forgot. You can win one of, not one, not two, but 3 copies of A Long Time Gone. All of you who are here today, whose names I see, Sharon Bishop, Julie Brinkley, Betty Fellows, Robin Stull says hello from chilly Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, have a chance to win a copy of this book, and we will spin the wheel of fun 3 times at the end of the show. But in order to enter to win, you have to leave a question or a comment or just general applause and approval for Josh Moehling. Josh is the author of the Ben Packard series. His first mystery, And There He Kept Her, was a Barnes & Noble monthly mystery thriller pick and was selected as best mystery both by Apple and Amazon editors. His second novel, Where the Dead Sleep, was described as a well-paced whodunit and devastating by the New York Times. Devastating is good when it comes to this. 2-time finalist for the Lambda Literary Award for Best LGBTQ plus Mystery. His newest book is A Long Time Gone. Let's hold that up one more time. Out this week from Poison Pen Source Books, and we love that publisher. They always bring us such fantastic books. And thank you for Source Books and Mandy for giving us the 3 copies to give away. Not this one. I am keeping it because I'm a big fan. Josh, tell us about this particular book.
So, A Long Time Gone is the third book in the Ben Packard series. A little bit of background: Ben Packard is the main character. He's a sheriff's deputy in a small town in rural northern Minnesota. He was a police officer in Minneapolis before that, until another police officer that he was in a relationship was killed in the line of duty. And that kind of turned Packard's life upside down, and he kind of thought he needed a fresh start. So he moves back to this small town in Minnesota where he actually spent his childhood because his grandparents lived there. And he takes his job as a sheriff's deputy. And I try to write the books so they each stand alone, but there's an arc over these three books that has to do with Packard's brother, who disappeared from this small town 30 years ago. So now Packard is the sheriff's deputy. He has access to the files from his brother's case from a long time ago. And in each of these three books, he gets a little bit more information and a little bit more information. The second book ended on a bit of a cliffhanger regarding the brother. And now in the third book, he's on leave because he's involved in a police shooting at the very beginning of the book. And now he's got time to look into his brother's case and finally find out what happened to his brother.
I know it's a series, and I've read every single one of them. And I can tell you that they're very easy to read as standalones as well. So if you all want to start with A Long Time Gone, where the story of the missing brother is finally wrapped up, it's fine. And then you can go back and read the backstory of what happens. They're all just so good. And the things that are lovely about these books, three things really stand out. The character of Ben is marvelous, and I want to talk about him first in a minute. The setting is just so immersive and cinematic. It's great. And your writing and storytelling is so lovely and so well thought of and so elegant, that you're just such a good storyteller. So let's, exactly as Heather says, we love Heather: intrigue, suspense, memorable characters, shining prose, and an ending that is equal parts heart-stopping and heart-tugging. I could have written that myself. I mean, you're so right.
Heather's the best.
So let's talk about Ben, and tell me what he's like and where he came from in your mind.
Yeah, so I guess the interesting thing that sets this series apart is that Ben Packard is a gay man working in law enforcement in a small, rural, kind of conservative part of Minnesota. And you don't always see a gay main character in this role featured in a police procedural like this, especially not in a rural setting. And there's been lots of series, of course, with gay main characters, and there's been lots of other books by other writers that where there's mystery books and thriller books with gay main characters. But I think this particular set of elements, I think, is kind of what makes the books unique. And Packard is a very kind of upstanding, moral character. He's always trying to do the right thing. I was kind of reminded of Joe Pickett from the CJ Box series, right? He's kind of the same guy. He's a family person. He's a good guy, always kind of trying to do the right thing, which is not always easy when you're trying to catch a murderer sometimes.
I mean, it's funny that you describe him as Joe Pickett, because it is that same sort of outdoor milieu, that sort of rural, dark, forested, kind of way. Except I always just picture him as sort of Jimmy Stewart or Gary Cooper. That kind of, he just seems, to me, he's handsome and smart and sensitive and a really good guy and caring, but tough too. Honorable, superly honorable. And one of the cool things about it is that he comes back to his hometown, so he knows it and he doesn't know it. He's comfortable there, but he's not comfortable there. Can you talk about why you did that to poor Ben?
Yeah, well, Ben kind of did it to himself. I guess I am the master of all this, but Packard has not done a good job dealing with the trauma in his life, and a lot of it all kind of comes to the head in this book. I mentioned the police officer that he was in a relationship who was killed in the first book. he never really dealt with that trauma. He decided to take kind of the geographic cure, and he thought, if I move back home to this small town, that'll take care of all these feelings and all this uh, anger and that I have about this issue. He hasn't really dealt with the trauma of his brother going missing. He hasn't dealt with the trauma of losing the election in the second book. So he's like a shark that's just always swimming and never stopping and never looking back. And um, in the first book, he's kind of questioning. I moved to this small town, I didn't really think about it, and can I make a life for myself here? And so it's one of the things that I'm having fun exploring is seeing him settle, kind of reconcile with this decision he made and settle in this place and try to build a life for himself, where he is kind of an ultimate outsider. He knows it from his childhood, but people don't know him because it's been a long time. And again, he's a gay man. He's 6'4" in law enforcement. He sticks out like a sore thumb. So he's got a lot to work with.
Yeah, but I love how you allow him to reveal himself to us, both through his investigation of the crime and his investigation of his own character, and that reveals the story to the reader. Is that something that you consciously did, or is that how it just came out?
Yeah, I think, there's in each one of these books, there's two parts of it, right? There's the crime that Packard has to solve, and then I'm always curious about what's going on with Packard himself and in his personal life, in his professional life. And we all have, day jobs, and it's hard to keep your personal life separate from what happens at work and vice versa. So I think it's just kind of natural that his personality comes out as he's doing this investigation, and what's going on in his personal life flavors these investigations. It's all intertwined, I think.
Yeah, we know that a good story is all about the decisions that a character makes and how the obstacles that are placed before them and what decisions they make in order to conquer them reveal who they really are.
Yeah.
Is that how you think of it? Not just him, but everybody in the book.
Yeah. Every character in multiple places in the book, they have to make a decision, right? It's a left or a right. It's a yes or a no. It's an up or a down. And those are the kind of the inflection points, I think, where the story can really get interesting or make a turn that, even if we'll probably talk about pantsing versus plotting later, but even if some of the stuff where I've plotted it out, these are the moments along the way that you can't expect.
Well, we can talk about it now. I have no list. And it does make sense, because when there is that decision, that inflection point, as you call it, when there is a decision to be made, if you've plotted out the book before, you know what that decision will be.
Yeah.
If you haven't, then you don't, and you can take it from, but either way, you as the author have to figure out why someone would do what they do. So do you have an outline, or do you just see what happens?
It's changed a little bit with each book. The first book I pantsed the whole way through. I couldn't see past the end of my nose as I was writing that first book. The second one, I definitely plotted because I wanted to write a whodunit and I needed to know who the killer was. And I only had a year to write that book. And I was like, I got to figure it, do some quick on the job training here. And then A Long Time Gone, I knew I had to resolve the brother thing. So I didn't know when I sat down, I had some ideas when I sat down to write what had happened to the brother, because I'd been thinking about it for 2 books now. But then I also felt like the brother wasn't a big enough story to carry the whole book, and I needed another crime for him to solve. But I kind of wanted them intertwined. So I spent some time thinking about that and how they could kind of play off of each other. And I kind of had some beats along the way that I knew, but there's still a lot of room for improvisation there, even when you kind of know where the story is going ultimately.
Yeah, I so agree with you, because I think you can, even though you sort of think you know where you're going, when the characters are alive in your mind, they have backstory and they have experience and they have reactions that you subconsciously understand, but you didn't think of it at first.
Yeah.
Is that fun for you when Ben or one of your wonderful secondary characters makes a decision that surprises you?
It is fun. Yeah, it's kind of where the magic happens in writing these books. It's those kind of moments of serendipity, or those kind of unexpected happy surprises that come along. There was one point in this book where they find a woman who's been killed, and once they identify her, they find out that she's got a missing persons file on her in Minneapolis. And I was getting to that part of the book, and I was like, okay, Packard's got to go to Minneapolis, and he's got to talk to this cop. And then there's somebody else I want him to talk to down there. And I was so bored just thinking about having to write this scene. I was like, what's going on here? What else can happen? And then I remembered that Packard used to be a police officer in Minneapolis. I was like, what if he knows the guy who wrote the missing persons file on this lady? And then I was like, well, what if he knows this guy, like knows him? And then said that, in all my kind of planning, that was never there. And it just took off. And that guy became kind of an important character in the book. And now he's in the 4th book that I just finished writing, and you can't plan for that stuff.
You can't plan for that stuff. I love that. And I think it's wonderful too, because when we're writing and we think, I have no idea, you sort of learn, if you learn anything in writing novels, is that, yeah, you don't know right now, but in a little while you will know.
Yeah.
And that the answer will come. The setting is so much a part. Don't let me forget the plot, you all, because I really think that we should go back and talk a little bit more about the plot of A Long Time Gone. 3 of you will win this book. All you have to do is leave a question or a comment in the chat, and we will enter your name in the Wheel of Fun. So don't forget to do that, please, please, please. Sherry says, so glad there's another book. We are too. The setting is so much a part of this story, both the physical setting and Ben's relationship to it, which makes a lot of difference as well. Can you describe the physical setting, and then how Ben, and who lives there and why, and how Ben puts himself in that world?
Yeah, so it's a small town, and I don't currently live in a small town. We live in Minneapolis, but I grew up in a small town in South Dakota. I went to college in a small town in South Dakota. We had a cabin for a while in a small town in Wisconsin. I've been all over Minnesota, and I've always been intrigued by life in a small town. And it's got a lot of appeal to it to me in a lot of ways. But small town settings are great for mystery novels, because you can really, small dramas are big dramas in a small town, in a small town setting. And then Minnesota is just such a beautiful state. We've got cities, we've got prairie grasses, we've got heavy forests, we've got limestone quarries. It's just we've got terrible weather and beautiful weather, and it's just every single element that you need in a good mystery.
And Ben is familiar with it, but not familiar with it. The town has changed since he's been gone. Can you tell us a little bit about that and his exploration of the place he knows but doesn't know, and the people too?
Yeah. So yeah, his grandparents had a house in this small town, and the house is still there. His grandparents are dead, obviously. And he's got memories of like the old Main Street and shoplifting from the Five and Dime that used to be there when he was a kid, and riding his bikes with his brothers and sisters all over the place. So he's got a lot of memories of his childhood in this place. And then there's a lot of bad memories after his brother disappeared, and it kind of blew his family apart. And then they stopped coming here because it just wasn't a happy place anymore. Mm-hmm. So he's kind of reconciling with all of that, what used to be versus what is, what he thinks what he remembers versus what actually happened. Yeah. And all that kind of plays together in this book.
And yeah. What somebody might have told him.
Yeah.
About what happened, which is always such a factor. When you have a little fictional town, it's fictional, right?
Yeah.
So when you have a fictional town, then you, Josh, have to populate it with people.
Yeah.
How did you do that? How did you pick the people? Some of whom they're all wonderful. Some are terrible, but some are wonderful. Some are hilarious. And it's not only the population of the town, but the population of Ben's new circle of people.
Yeah.
Can you talk about those circles?
Yeah. So, like I was saying, he's got to build a life for himself. He came to Sandy Lake and he thought he was going to be a hermit and he was going to do penance in silence and solitude for this relationship that he wasn't fully invested in when it ended. And, that's just not realistic. And he slowly built this circle of people around him that includes coworkers, includes people that he's met in the town as he's been doing investigations. A lot of kind of crazy characters. There's like Kelly, the admin from the sheriff's office, who's seen Barry Manilow in concert 200 times. And there's his partner, Thielen, the other detective in the bureau who gives him grief a lot. He's got romantic interests that kind of are passing through the town that, stay for a book or two. And then he's got his family. His mom plays a big role in this book, and she comes back to town, and they spend a lot of time talking about what happened all those years ago.
Was it? I mean, the character with the Barry Manilow songs is so hilarious, and that's such a good little quirky, funny, sticky idea. Are you a Barry Manilow fan, or is somebody, or where did that come from?
So the character's name is Kelly, and in my previous job, I worked with a woman named Kelly, and we sat next to each other. Our cubicles are right next to each other. And she taught me everything I needed to know about my job when I started there. And Kelly has seen Barry Manilow in concert over 200 times. She's a super, super Barry Manilow fan. And I told her, I was like, I got to put this in the book. I hope you're okay with it. She loved it.
Because it tells you so much about somebody, that they're lovely, that they're loyal, that they're funny, that they're musical, that they're friendly, that they're open, that, you could, if she liked Pick Another Band, she would be a different person. I just think that that's so genius of you. There's the themes in your novel of belonging and justice and loss and family and sort of finding yourself. Did you think, I'm going to write a book about loss, or I'm going to write a book about regaining your self-respect? Or do you have story first or theme first?
It's always story first. I almost am never thinking about theme. I try to think about it more in the revision process. And yeah, a lot of times the theme emerges as you're writing the story, right? The fourth book I described to my editor that I just finished. I was like, I guess this is my anti-capitalism book. No one sits down and says, I'm going to write an anti-capitalism mystery.
That would be, can you imagine telling your agent?
Yeah, they'd be like, pass. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not hardcore like that, but there's, it's.
But you can think about, it's funny though, isn't it? When you're writing your book and it's all about once upon a time there was, and it's a story and you want people to turn the page and try to solve the mystery. But at some point, like 7/8 of the way through, I always think, oh, redemption, or, oh, this is about trust. And then you see that everything else in the book that you've already written is about that. Do you have those moments?
Yeah, I'm going through that right now. It's so funny. You kind of get amnesia with these books. Like, it's hard to remember writing A Long Time Gone now, because I just finished writing the fourth one. Mm-hmm. So up to my eyebrows in the fourth one. But yeah, I mean, the closer I got to the end of that book, I was like, wow, there's a lot in this book about storms and climate change and working yourself to death for nothing in return. And, it's, a lot of it. And you kind of start to realize this as you get closer to the end of the book. Yeah,
it's interesting how, suddenly you're writing about the meaning of life. Who knew?
Right. I just thought it was a murder mystery. That's
well, it's funny. Speaking of mysteries, the AP in a wonderful review said, if you think you've got the mystery solved in the first few chapters, you're dead wrong, says AP. How much is that? I mean, your readers are really smart, and your readers are trying to figure out what happened before you tell them. Are you playing that cat and mouse game with your readers of staying a couple steps ahead of them consciously, or are you just telling a good story?
I'm trying to get better at that. Like I said, Where the Dead Sleep was the first whodunit I wrote, and I was and there he kept her. There was no mystery. You knew from chapter one where those missing kids were in that guy's basement. And the whole book, you're just waiting for Packard to catch up. And Where the Dead Sleep, I wanted to see if I could keep you guessing about who the killer was. And I think I did a pretty good job, especially for my first time, because a lot of people said they had no idea who the killer was by the end. So yeah, I'm definitely trying to get to keep you guessing, because those are two different kinds of books, right? One's a mystery and one's a thriller, and I think they're both great forms of the genre, but it takes a little bit of a different skill between those two.
Yes, and sometimes in a thriller, you're trying to stop a bad thing from happening, and in a mystery, you're trying to figure out why the bad thing has already happened and solve the crime. Yeah, very different kinds of books. But still in crime fiction. When you started writing the first of the Ben Packards, did you mean it to be a series? I have some memory? Kathy says you did a great job of keeping me guessing.
Thank you, Kathy.
Do I remember some serendipitous story about how Ben Packard actually came to be?
I wrote a book before in there, he kept her, that was set in Sandy Lake, the same small town, and it was not a police procedural. It was about a writer, kind of like Stephen King, and the plane crash and his missing manuscript. And he had a handyman who had a traumatic brain injury, and everybody was looking for the missing manuscript. And the handyman and his friend got interviewed by a sheriff's deputy. And then he and his friend were talking about getting interviewed by the sheriff's deputy, and they were like, "Do you think that guy is gay?" And then they were making some cracks about him, and that was it. The sheriff's deputy didn't even have a name in that book. And some agents read it, and a bunch of agents told me it just doesn't work, and I couldn't figure out how to make it work. And I was trying to figure out, well, what am I going to write next? And I was really kind of enamored with this small town. And I was like, what about the gay sheriff's deputy? Like, where did that guy come from? I don't even know why he had to be gay in that book, because he didn't do anything. So I couldn't let go of that idea. So I just said, let's find out where this guy came from and how he got here and what his life is like.
And you come up, out of that disappointment, you come up with this iconic, lovely character who your fans, including me, all adore. And what does that teach you? I mean, I don't mean to be highfalutin about it, but what does it teach you about steps along the way and how we don't know what's good?
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea how this was going to change my life. I couldn't even anticipate all the amazing things that have come from this. But I always tell people, I mean, my story of getting published is kind of depressing, because I tell people I wrote bad novels for 15 years that nobody was interested in, and they weren't very good. But I learned and learned and learned. Every bit of that writing taught me something, and every bit of that commitment to keep writing, even after I wrote another bad book and another bad book, it was all part of getting to where I am today. There's no wasted writing. There's no wasted time. My journey took 15 years. Your journey might take 2 years, but it takes as long as it takes. And there's learning along the way, and there's no getting to where you are now without the work that comes in front of it.
I mean, you've had a day job for many years, which you were saying earlier that now you're a full-time writer.
Yep. Yeah, it's been amazing. I've got the greatest publisher. The books they've just made miracles happen for these books. They've done an amazing job making people aware of them and getting them in their hands and making them available for purchase. Hank, you've been amazing this whole entire time supporting these books. I'm so thankful for that. And yeah, it's just gotten me to the point in a relatively short amount of time where I'm able to quit my job and be a full-time writer. I couldn't be more happy or grateful for that.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. I'm second guessing myself here. I want to take questions from you in about 1 minute, but I realized that I don't think I asked about the plot, right? I mean, small thing, but just, you said it was Ben was there was a police shooting and Ben was put on leave, and it gave him time to look for his missing brother, but that's not the only part of the story.
That's right. Yeah. So he's as he looks into what happened to his brother, and his mom comes to town when he tells her not to, but she comes anyway. They go to visit the grandparents' house, um, and they find out that the woman who most recently owned the house died not too long ago. She fell down the basement stairs. There was a broken bottle of whiskey, and the assumption that people quickly came to was that it was an accident. An elderly woman falls in her home. She's probably drinking. But Packard knows this house, and he sees something that just doesn't sit right with him, and he starts asking questions. And the more questions he asks, the more it becomes clear to him that this was not an accident. That somebody killed this woman, and he's got to figure out why. And so the house is where his brother disappeared from 30 years ago. It's the house his grandparents lived in and he grew up as a kid. It's the house where this woman died. So it's really, the house kind of ties the two cases together until the end, where he gets the answers to both what happened to this woman and what happened to his brother.
Got to love that. Location, location, location. And you didn't even know when you started that was going to happen in a long time gone. Oh, I know you have, Renee is asking, do you have a real, the plot, says Robin. Renee says, do you have a real brother? Do you have a real brother?
I do. I have a real brother and a real sister.
There you go. She can be
They're both alive. They're not missing.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I hope that you'll see them, and they must be so delighted with your wild success as an author. We have the fabulous Margaret in the back room who has our questions ready to go. Andrew Ball says, is the small town more Fargo or more Twin Peaks? Genius question, Andrew.
That is a brilliant question. I would say it's more Fargo. I feel like, I mean, there's a little more supernatural weirdness going on in Twin Peaks, which I was a huge fan of way back in the day. Yeah, I think it's more Fargo. It's got that, it's got the accents for sure. It's got that dark humor, I think, that you expect from Fargo.
And quirky characters and snow and all that sort of stuff. Okay. Well, that's a great question, Andrew. Well, who else has a question? What are the biggest issues in law enforcement in northern Minnesota, says Margaret in the back room. How did you choose which crimes to include? It's so interesting.
Oh my God, we could talk for an hour about this. Just real briefly, I'm writing about law enforcement in Minnesota post George Floyd, where George Floyd was murdered about 5 miles from my house. And when my first book was on submission, it was about 3 weeks after George Floyd was killed. And I was meeting with editors, and they were like, it's not a great time for a book about a white cop from Minnesota. And I couldn't deal with that in the first book because it was already written, and I was writing the second book and the city was still burning at that point. And so I finally talk about, how Packard feels as a law enforcement person in Minnesota. Because this book opens with a shooting, he's involved with a shooting, and he's contributing to this idea that the cops just show up with guns and kill people, and that's how they solve problems, and that's the last thing that he wants to do. So a part of this book is him reconciling his involvement with this shooting that he's been involved in, and kind of the emotional trauma of taking someone's life that he's just been involved with.
And you're emotionally dealing with that. Ben's emotionally dealing with that shooting at the beginning is very revealing and very sort of turning the prism on how many of us or many people look at that kind of situation, to sort of see it from inside. What was it like to write that and be in that perspective?
It was, I felt like it had to be done. I was like, I'm at the third book in this, and he's been involved in a shooting, and you can't talk about these things and not talk about George Floyd. I haven't even mentioned COVID in any of these books because I was like, I just don't want to deal with COVID. But I felt like it was time for him to address it, for him to think about it. It was hard to write. But I think in this topic, I need to be more of a listener than a speaker.
Oh,
I don't think the middle-aged white guy's voice is what's most important in these discussions about law enforcement and the different communities that they interact with. But, I put my spin on it. I tried to address it, and I think in a fair way. And I hope people respond to it.
Yes, it's very revealing and incredibly well done. A real tightrope to walk, but
Mhm.
really incredibly geniusly done. We have many questions about book 4. Oh, Julie wants to know, I'm curious to know if you've ever written any part of your novels on location. Oh, Julie.
Um, I write all over the place. I mean, I'm doing most of my writing at home. Um, I've written at the cabin that we used to have in Wisconsin. I read at the library down the street from my
Mhm.
house. Um, I mean, there's no Sandy Lake, so I can't go to Sandy Lake and write. But I don't know if that answers the question or not.
Yeah, sure it does. Absolutely. So there's no Sandy Lake. So, but you're in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Who else has I know there are several questions about book 4. Oh, that's interesting, Sharon. The first book has a lot of information about someone with diabetes. How did you decide to use that as part of your storyline?
That's a great question. So there was two things. I felt like I got a certain way in the book, and I felt like something's missing. I felt like I needed a ticking clock, and the girl with the insulin pump running out of insulin felt like a good ticking clock. It was like that was when she ran up. That really influenced her relationship with Emmett, who was holding her hostage. And so I felt like that was the element I needed to kind of give that story a little bit of extra juice. And then I worked at Medtronic for a long time, which makes the #1 selling insulin pump in the country. So I had access to good information.
Yeah, so talk about research. That's use what you knew.
Yeah.
That's so great. That's great. So let's go to book 4 for a second in the minute or so that we have left. The first 3 books include the search for Ben's brother, which was essentially, I suppose, resolved in book 3. So is there another arc of Ben's life that opens up in book 4, or will you keep the sort of dual layers, or can you even tell us?
I'm still figuring that out. So I've just finished the first draft of book 4. And in some ways it does feel like a restart because you can't fall back on that brother story anymore. It's all been resolved. But
Mhm.
there's other elements that come from the earlier books that are still kind of influencing the story. There's another crime, obviously. I don't know what happens in books 5 and 6 yet. I want to think of these kind of in trilogies. I'm like, okay, what could be the arc over these next 3 books if I was going to do something like that? And I'm still working on that.
Oh, so many possibilities, though. I mean, once you start just thinking what they might be, you could just have you could have a million of them. That's great. We're so out of time. Looking really, really quickly to see if there's another question that is a burning question. Renee says, "How did you come?" I love this. This is our perfect, great question. How did you come up with the officer's name? Are you a Packers fan? Packers.
Packard's name changed and changed and changed as I was writing the first book. It was never Packer, but it was always a P name. It was like Pendleton, and it was Parsons, and it was something else. And then he was John, and he was. They just kind of kept changing the whole entire time. And then at the very end, I said, "What about Packard?" And then at the very last thing I did was I changed his first name again, and then it became Ben Packard. I was like, okay, that's perfect. I like this. It was punchy. It was short. It's kind of masculine, and it's what I wanted. And then my husband read the book, and he's like, that sounds like Jen Packer, who we have a really good friend named Jen Packer. And I was like, oh my God, I never heard that. And she, of course, when she read the book, she's like, Ben Packard.
Mm. I do think that I mean, you just can't predict. I mean, very, very quickly, when I was trying to think of the love interest for my main character, my first novel, I thought, and now I'm laughing because when you hear this, you'll know. I thought I need a cool first name that's short and punchy and that we instantly love the person. And so I'm like, Ben, Luke, Josh. Josh is perfect. Okay, he's Josh. And then I was trying to think of a last name, and it had to be sort of no baggage in the last name, just strong but no baggage, that you would not have any idea of what that name might mean or where they came from. Like Packard, it's strong, a strong last name. You need a strong last name. So I thought Gelston is good. Gelston. And my first boyfriend, I think when I was 10, his last name was Gelston. So I thought, and his name was Philip, but it can't be Philip because of Philippi. So I couldn't have Philip. So I needed Josh Gelston, like made up name Josh that I love, and old boyfriend from when I was 10. And when the book came out, the first day the book came out, I got an email from a person who lives in New Hampshire called Josh Gelston. Well, you don't know me. Why did you name this book? It turned out that he was like a caterer for rock bands. He was a roadie for rock bands, and why he was reading my books, I don't know. But it's just the universe is weird.
Yeah, it is crazy.
It's really funny. But thank you for Josh. Anyway, you all, thank you for your absolutely fantastic questions. Let us spin the wheel of fun 3 times to see what 3 lucky winners get A Long Time Gone. And spin number 1 is, look at all of you who are here. That's so great. You're so smart to be here. And the winner is Kathy Lanigan. Wonderful. Yeah. Kathy Lanigan lives like 2 towns from me, and that's so great. Thank you. All right, and we're spinning again. Kathy Lanigan, remember you won. And also Sherry Steuben, wonderful. Rainbow Sherry is our 2nd winner, and 3rd winner. This is fun. We should do this all the time. Thank you for this. Thank you, Source Books and Poison Pen. No, we can't win. It's Margaret in the back room. I know you want this, but you can't have it. Well, I'll give you mine. Normal. Randy T. That's great. So wonderful that you won, Randy. Thank you. So you know all the deal to email me, message me, or email me, and I will send it to our producer, who will send it to Josh's publicist, who will send you your book. And we are so thrilled. Thank you, Josh, for being here today. Congratulations on this book.
Thank you very much, Hank. Thanks for having me back again.
Oh, it's been great. We always love you, and you're going to have to come to book 4 for book 4. Does it have a title? Can you tell?
It doesn't. It's called book 4 right now.
Just say no. And you all, we will see you here next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET, for we are going to be hearing from Trisha Sakaleka, whose new book, a debut, The Inheritance, is just going to be out. You can see this copy I have is just a bound manuscript. This isn't even a fancy book. It's very early. Cannot wait to read this book. It has gotten so much buzz and so many good reviews. The Washington Post says this book is Agatha Christie meets Succession. So I ask you, that is instantly going to be good. Again, you all, I'm so pleased that you all came today. It is so nice to see. I always look at every one of your names. Thank you, Deborah. I always look at every one of your names and think, oh, I'm so glad they came. That is really nice of you. Josh, safe and happy travels.
Thank you, Hank. Hope we cross paths soon.
I hope so too. I hope so too. Tell everybody in Houston I said hi. And you all, thank you so much for being here today. And remember, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you next time.